The alien invader came from the fringes of the known galaxy, a force unlike anything the galaxy's civilizations had ever faced. It moved with terrifying speed, overwhelming defenses, and leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. Advanced technology, vast armies, and fortified worlds were no match for this relentless onslaught. The invaders' ships, black as the void and bristling with unknown weapons, tore through star systems with a precision and brutality that defied comprehension. Entire fleets were obliterated before they could even mount a defense, and planets that had stood for millennia were reduced to smoldering ruins. The galaxy's greatest powers, once thought invincible, fell one by one. The Green, with their unmatched fleet of warships, were the first to fall. Their ships, once a symbol of dominance, were shattered in the opening salvos of the invaders' assault. The Zorith, known for their impregnable planetary defenses, watched in horror as their shielded worlds were breached and their cities turned to ash. Even the Vierith, whose advanced AI-controlled armies had never known defeat, were decimated, their machines reduced to scrap under the invaders' relentless barrage. No strategy, no technology, no force could stand against the invaders' relentless advance. As the invader continued its march across the galaxy, hope began to fade. The survivors, a small coalition of species who had managed to escape the initial onslaught, huddled on a remote outpost, far from the invaders' direct path. But they knew it was only a matter of time before the enemy found them. Desperation gripped the outpost as the last of their scouts returned with grim news. There was no one left to help them. The mightiest civilizations had fallen, and they were all that remained. The once proud coalition was reduced to a ragtag group of refugees, their numbers dwindling as they struggled to hold on to the last vestiges of hope. In a final, desperate attempt to resist the invader, the survivors mounted a last-ditch defense. They cobbled together what few ships and weapons they had left, preparing to make their stand. But the reality was clear: this was not a fight they could win. Their forces were decimated, their morale shattered. The outpost commanders, once confident in their abilities, now spoke only of delaying the inevitable, buying what little time they could for their people to flee further into the unknown. As the invader drew closer, a grim realization set in. The survivors were out of options. Their calls for help had gone unanswered, and there was no one left to save them. No one, except perhaps for one distant, enigmatic force that had remained neutral throughout the war: humanity. The humans, known for their fierce independence and reluctance to get involved in galactic conflicts, had been conspicuously absent as the invaders swept across the galaxy. Their homeworld, Earth, had remained untouched, its people focused on their own survival and development, seemingly indifferent to the fate of the galaxy around them. But now, with all other hopes extinguished, the survivors faced a difficult choice. Summoning the human fleet might be their only chance of survival, but there was no guarantee that humanity would respond, or that they would even care. The decision weighed heavily on the outpost's leaders. Some argued that humanity had no reason to help, that they would remain neutral as they always had. Others, driven by desperation, believed that it was worth the risk. After all, if the invader was not stopped here, it was only a matter of time before they turned their sights on Earth as well. The distress signal reached Earth as a faint, desperate cry among the countless communications that filled the galaxy. It was an urgent plea, carrying with it the weight of 1,000 lost battles, the voices of civilizations on the brink of extinction. As the message was decoded and analyzed, it became clear that this was not just another call for help. It was the last gasp of a galaxy that had been brought to its knees by an unstoppable force. For years, humanity had watched from a distance, maintaining a careful neutrality, as the wars raged on beyond their borders. But this signal cut through the noise, demanding attention in a way that could not be ignored. On Earth, the initial reaction was one of cautious deliberation. Humanity had always prided itself on its independence, its ability to thrive without entangling itself in the affairs of other species. The horrors of past galactic conflicts had taught them the value of isolation, of focusing on their own survival and development rather than becoming embroiled in the chaos of the wider galaxy. But now, faced with the possibility of an alien invader that had already crushed the galaxy's greatest powers, they were forced to consider the unthinkable. Should they intervene? The debate among Earth's leaders, scientists, and military strategists was intense. On one hand, there was the argument for maintaining their current course, staying out of the conflict and continuing to build their strength in isolation. Humanity had weathered countless threats by keeping to themselves, and there was a strong belief that they could do so again. But the more pragmatic voices pointed out a harsh truth: if the invader was not stopped, it was only a matter of time before it turned its attention to Earth. The galaxy was vast, but it was not infinite, and humanity's isolation would not protect them forever. As the discussions continued, the cold calculations of survival began to take precedence over any lingering ideals of neutrality. The invaders' advance had been relentless, and there was little reason to believe that Earth would be spared if the rest of the galaxy fell. The risks of intervention were high, but the risks of inaction were even higher. Humanity's leaders recognized that they could no longer afford to remain on the sidelines. The invader had to be stopped before it could reach their doorstep. The decision to mobilize the fleet was not made out of a sense of duty or compassion for the other species of the galaxy. It was a calculated move, born out of the need to eliminate a future threat before it became too great to handle. The leaders of Earth knew that they could not fight this battle alone, but they also knew that they could not ignore it. Their survival depended on taking action, and they were prepared to do whatever it took to ensure that Earth remained safe. As the order was given to prepare the fleet, the full extent of humanity's military power was brought to bear. For years, they had developed their technology in secret, advancing far beyond what the rest of the galaxy believed possible. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, and their strategies more sophisticated than anything the invader had encountered before. The fleet that was being assembled was not just a defensive force, it was a weapon, designed to strike with precision and decisiveness. The mobilization of the human fleet was a sight to behold. Massive warships, bristling with advanced weaponry, began to emerge from hidden shipyards and orbital facilities. Crews were assembled, each member highly trained and prepared for the conflict ahead. Every detail was meticulously planned, every possible scenario accounted for. This was not a rushed or panicked response. It was the culmination of years of preparation, a testament to humanity's ability to anticipate and adapt to any challenge. As the fleet prepared to depart, there was a palpable sense of determination among those who would be on the front lines. They knew that they were not going into battle out of some noble cause or a desire to save the galaxy. They were going to protect their home, to ensure that Earth remained free from the devastation that had befallen so many others. The stakes were higher than they had ever been, but humanity had faced long odds before and emerged victorious. This time would be no different. The human fleet arrived at the remote outpost with a suddenness that left the survivors breathless. What had once been a scattered and desperate assembly of ships from fallen civilizations now seemed almost insignificant in the shadow of the approaching armada. The human fleet, composed of massive warships, each one bristling with weaponry and exuding an air of invincibility, dwarfed anything the survivors had ever seen. As the fleet moved into position, it became clear that this was not just a rescue operation, it was a show of force, a declaration that humanity had entered the fight with all the power and precision they could muster. The survivors watched in awe and fear as the human ships took up formation, their movements synchronized with an almost eerie efficiency. The contrast between the human fleet and the disorganized remnants of the coalition forces was stark. Where the survivors had been struggling to hold the line, their ships battered and their crews exhausted, the human fleet appeared pristine and ready for battle. Every ship was in its place, every weapon system online and prepared to unleash devastation upon the invader. The survivors, who had once felt the crushing weight of impending defeat, now found themselves filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Could this be the turning point they so desperately needed? The initial engagement between the human fleet and the alien invader was nothing short of spectacular. As the enemy ships moved to intercept the newcomers, they were met with a barrage of firepower unlike anything they had encountered before. Human weaponry, advanced and deadly, tore through the invaders' ranks with ruthless precision. Lasers and missiles cut through shields and hulls as if they were made of paper, reducing once formidable warships to floating debris in a matter of seconds. The human fleet moved as one, each ship playing its role in a carefully orchestrated assault that left the enemy reeling. The tactics employed by the humans were unlike anything the alien invader had faced in its relentless march across the galaxy. While the invader had grown accustomed to overwhelming its opponents with sheer numbers and brute force, the humans fought with a level of strategic finesse that turned every encounter into a deadly trap. They anticipated the enemy's movements, luring them into kill zones where their ships could be picked off with devastating efficiency. It was clear that the human fleet had not only come prepared but had studied the invader's tactics in advance, using that knowledge to exploit every weakness. As the battle raged on, the survivors watched in awe as the tide began to turn. The alien invader, which had seemed unstoppable just hours before, now found itself on the defensive. The human forces pressed their advantage with relentless determination, cutting through the enemy lines and driving them back. The survivors, who had once been resigned to their fate, now felt a flicker of hope reignite within them. The human fleet, with its unmatched power and tactical brilliance, was doing what no one else had been able to, stopping the invader in its tracks. The turning point came when the invader, realizing that it was facing a far more formidable opponent than it had anticipated, attempted to regroup and mount a counteroffensive. But the humans were ready. They anticipated the enemy's moves, intercepting their communications and disrupting their formations. The alien ships, once so confident in their dominance, now found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. The humans struck hard and fast, exploiting the chaos to deliver crippling blows to the invader's fleet. For the survivors, the change in the battle's dynamics was nothing short of miraculous. Where there had once been only despair, there was now a growing sense of hope. The human fleet had not only arrived, they had taken control of the battle, forcing the invader to adapt or face annihilation. The survivors, who had felt the crushing weight of defeat for so long, now saw a glimmer of victory on the horizon. The humans, once reluctant to join the fight, had become the galaxy's last hope for survival. As the battle continued, the survivors began to rally, inspired by the humans' strength and determination. Ships that had been on the verge of collapse found new energy, joining the fight with renewed vigor. The human fleet's presence had changed everything. No longer were they fighting a losing battle. They were now part of a coordinated, strategic assault that had the potential to turn the tide of the entire war. The invader, which had brought so much death and destruction, was finally facing a force capable of standing against it. When the human fleet unleashed its full might, the galaxy bore witness to a force that had been tempered by centuries of preparation and honed to perfection. The offensive was swift, coordinated, and utterly devastating. Human warships moved in precise formations, their weapons systems executing complex algorithms to deliver pinpoint strikes that tore through the alien invader's defenses. Advanced missile systems, energy weapons, and railguns unleashed a torrent of destruction, reducing enemy ships to debris before they could even mount a proper defense. But it wasn't just the raw firepower that overwhelmed the invader. Humanity had mastered the art of war in ways that went beyond simple combat. Cyber warfare units, embedded deep within the human fleet, launched crippling attacks on the invader's communication and navigation systems. Within moments, the enemy fleet was thrown into chaos as their ships lost contact with one another, their commands intercepted and scrambled. Key systems malfunctioned, shields flickered and failed, and weapons misfired or went offline entirely. The invader, which had once moved with brutal efficiency, was now floundering, struggling to maintain cohesion in the face of a technological onslaught it was unprepared for. Humanity also employed psychological operations with chilling effectiveness. Broadcasts flooded the invaders' channels, messages designed to sow fear and uncertainty among their ranks. Images of their destroyed fleets, messages highlighting their imminent defeat, and the relentless advance of human forces played over and over, demoralizing the invader's soldiers and sowing discord within their command structure. The invader, which had known only victory until now, found itself grappling with an enemy that not only outgunned them but outthought them at every turn. As the human fleet pressed its attack, it became clear that this was not just a battle, it was an execution. The humans fought with a cold, calculated ruthlessness that shocked even their allies. They left nothing to chance, systematically dismantling the invaders' forces with precision and brutality. There were no half measures, no hesitation. Every strike was intended to eliminate, every tactic designed to ensure that the invader would not recover. The invaders' ships, which had once seemed invincible, were now little more than targets in a devastating exercise of military superiority. For the surviving members of the coalition, the scale and intensity of humanity's assault were both awe-inspiring and terrifying. They had witnessed destruction before, but nothing like this. The humans were relentless, their war machine a finely tuned instrument of annihilation. It was as if they were taking a cold, clinical pleasure in dismantling the enemy piece by piece, leaving no room for escape or mercy. The coalition members, who had once fought alongside the humans, now watched in stunned silence, realizing just how fortunate they were that humanity had chosen to fight with them and not against them. As the invaders' fleet crumbled under the onslaught, the strategic brilliance of humanity's tactics became even more apparent. Every move the invader made was anticipated and countered. Attempts to regroup were met with overwhelming force, pockets of resistance were crushed before they could gain momentum, and any retreat was cut off by swift, decisive strikes. The invader, which had once believed itself unstoppable, was now on the verge of total collapse, its forces scattered and leaderless, its morale shattered. The final moments of the battle were a foregone conclusion. The last remnants of the invaders' fleet, huddled around their command ships, made a desperate stand, but it was futile. The human fleet closed in, surrounding the invaders' stronghold with a ring of steel and fire. There was no escape, no negotiation. The humans gave no quarter, and within minutes, the invaders' command ships were engulfed in explosions, their leaders and remaining forces obliterated in a final, ruthless strike. With the destruction of the invaders' stronghold, the battle was over. The once feared alien force that had laid waste to countless civilizations was no more, reduced to nothing by the relentless might of humanity's war machine. The galaxy, which had watched in terror as the invaders swept across the stars, now found itself in a stunned silence. The invader had been crushed, not by an alliance of the galaxy's greatest powers, but by a single, determined species that had fought with an intensity and precision that few had ever witnessed. In the aftermath of the battle, the remnants of the coalition forces slowly began to comprehend the magnitude of their survival. What had seemed like certain extinction was now averted, but the cost of that salvation weighed heavily on them. The space around the outpost was littered with the debris of the invaders' once mighty fleet, now reduced to twisted metal and lifeless wreckage. The survivors, still reeling from the intensity of the conflict, grappled with a new reality, one where they were no longer on the brink of annihilation, but where the galaxy had been irrevocably changed by humanity's intervention. Humanity wasted no time in consolidating their victory. The clean-up operation was conducted with the same cold efficiency that had characterized their assault. Every piece of the invaders' technology was meticulously catalogued, analyzed, and either repurposed or destroyed to ensure no remnants could be used against them in the future. Patrols were dispatched to hunt down any surviving enemy ships that might have slipped through the cracks, leaving no stone unturned. It was a methodical process, devoid of any sentimentality, a clear message that humanity would leave nothing to chance when it came to securing their safety. As news of the battle spread across the galaxy, the reaction was one of shock and awe. Humanity, long seen as a distant and isolated species, had revealed itself as a dominant military power capable of crushing the galaxy's greatest threat with ruthless precision. Former allies who had doubted humanity's commitment to the fight now found themselves re-evaluating their stance, realizing that Earth was not just another planet, but a formidable power in its own right. Enemies who had once considered challenging humanity's independence now reconsidered their plans, knowing that any such move would likely end in disaster. The galaxy's perception of humanity had shifted dramatically. Where once there had been indifference or mild curiosity, there was now a profound respect tinged with fear. Humanity's willingness to intervene, albeit reluctantly, and their capability to do so with such devastating effectiveness, had left an indelible mark on the galactic consciousness. The balance of power had shifted, and humanity now stood at the center of that new order. Their power was undeniable, and their ability to wield it with such calculated force meant that they could no longer be ignored or underestimated. For the survivors, the victory brought with it an uncertain future. The invader had been defeated, but the galaxy they had known was gone, replaced by one where humanity's influence loomed large. There was relief in their survival, but also a recognition that they now lived in a galaxy fundamentally altered by Earth's rise. The question of what role humanity would play going forward weighed heavily on the minds of those who had once led the coalition. Would humanity become the galaxy's protector, or would they retreat back into isolation, leaving others to deal with the fallout? Humanity's new role in the galaxy was one of reluctant protector. They had no desire to rule or dominate, but their actions had shown that they would not hesitate to defend their interests, and that they had the power to do so on a scale that few could match. Earth had become a symbol of both hope and fear, a force that could bring peace or devastation depending on its own calculations. The survivors knew that any future conflicts would be shaped by humanity's decisions, and that those decisions would be driven by a singular focus on survival above all else.